Hi everyone. Today I will be doing a chemistry past paper. So this is 0620/21. So it's paper 2, May-June 2023, Cambridge IGCSE past paper. Okay, so there are 40 questions and you need to answer all the questions. And well, let's begin. So, okay, question 1. The diagram shows the result of dropping a purple crystal into water. Which processes take place in this experiment? So they have three options. You have chemical reaction, diffusing, and dissolving. So first thing you need to know is that it is not a chemical reaction. Why is it not a chemical reaction? Because for a chemical reaction to occur, you need to have some sort of visible signs, right? If the purple crystal just turns into a purple solution, there's no specifically visible signs like fizzing or something like that, right? So therefore, it's not a chemical reaction. And secondly, is it diffusing? Yes, it's diffusing because the purple is getting spread out throughout the entire solution. So diffusing is correct. And finally, dissolving. Is it dissolving? Yep, the solid turns and is spread throughout the liquid, so it also is dissolving. Therefore, the answer has to be D. Okay, question 2. Which row about elements, mixtures, and compounds is correct? Okay, so a metallic element. So which of these are metals and is an element, right? You only want one element. So brass is not an element. So B and D cannot be wrong. Brass is a mixture of elements, right? Copper is an element, so the answer is either A or C. Now next, non-metallic element. So comparing methane and sulfur, or methane, right? Methane is a compound. What methane looks like is it kind of looks like CH. This is what methane looks like, right? It is not an element because it contains two elements, right? It has hydrogen, which is one element, and it has carbon, which is another element. So therefore, the answer is not A. Therefore, you're left with C, right? So we can continue on just to double check. So mixture, brass, yes, brass is a mixture of two elements, right? And compound, finally, is a methane. Methane is a compound. Okay, so next, question 3. The atomic structures of 4 particles, W, X, Y, and Z, are shown. Which particles are isotopes of the same element? Sorry, yeah, there we go. Which particles are isotopes of the same element? So, first we need to know the definition of an isotope, right? So what is an isotope? For an isotope, for something to meet the criteria of an isotope, first off, the two elements must have the same same proton number. Okay, that's the first thing. They need to be the same element. Next, they need to have the same number of electrons also. Okay, so same proton number, same electron number, but they are isotopes when the neutron number is different. Okay, so when we look at the diagram here, let's take a look at the protons first, right? So the first criteria, we need to have the same proton number. So which of these two have the same proton number? So W and Y is one pair, because they both have two protons, and X and Z is another pair. Okay, so therefore, you know X and Y is wrong. W and Y is wrong. And, sorry, not W and Y is not wrong. W and X is wrong. And yeah, so it's either B or D, correct? So, next, they need to have the same number of electrons. So, between W and Y, they both have the same number of electrons, but if you look at X and Z, one has 2 electrons and one has 3 electrons. So therefore, X and Z is wrong automatically, right? They need to have the same number of electrons as well. So which particles are isotopes of the same element? It has to be W and Y. And we can use the third thing to double check. W has 2 neutrons, Y has 3 neutrons, so therefore W and Y is correct. Okay, question 4. Which statement explains why isotopes of the same element have the same chemical properties? Okay, so isotopes just means elements, the same element with different number of neutrons, right? So by that definition, why do they have the same chemical properties? So because they have the same chemical properties, it has to do with either the electrons or the protons, correct? And what governs chemical properties? Electrons, but not just any electron, it has to be outer shell electrons. So therefore, the answer has to be A. They have the same number of outer shell electrons, because outer shell electrons, or otherwise known as valence electrons, these electrons govern the chemical properties of elements or isotopes. Okay, question 5. Nitrogen forms a nitride ion with the formula N3-. Which particle does not have the same electronic configuration as the nitride ion? Okay, so with this question, to have the same electronic configuration is to have the same electron number, or the same number of electrons, right? So if you use the periodic table and you find the mass number of nitrogen, it will be 14. And since it's a 3-, you are adding 3 electrons, so 14 plus 3 equals 17. So the question is asking you, out of these 4 elements, which of them does not equal to 17? So if you do the calculations, right? So Al3 plus does have electron number of 17 if you take the time to calculate. So therefore, it is not A, the answer is not A. Cl minus does not have the electron number of 17, so therefore B is the answer, but we can check C and D to see if it's correct. Na plus will have 17 electrons, so it's not C, and O2 minus also has 17 electrons, so it's not D as well. So with this question, you just need to sort of count the number of electrons and make sure that it's the same as N3-, right? And you want to remember that when it says minus means you need to add electrons, right? You need to add the number. And if it's plus, like in Al3, you need to take away the number. Okay? Now, question 6. Which row describes the formation of single covalent bonds in methane? Okay? First, single covalent bonds. So covalent bonds, what's the definition of a covalent bond? Covalent first needs to involve two non-metals, and the covalent bond needs to also share electrons, right? Unlike an ionic bond, they take electrons. In a covalent bond, they share electrons, right? So if we look at the answer options, A and B, atoms share a pair of electrons. That's correct. Okay. C and D, electrons are transferred from one atom to another. That is wrong, because this is not a covalent bond anymore. Okay. Next, atoms share a pair of electrons, so the answer is either A or B. Both atoms gain a noble gas electronic structure. This is correct, so the answer is A. Because the point of creating bonds is so that those elements are able to achieve a stable outer shell, or the noble gas electronic structure, right? So the carbon will get 8 electrons, and the hydrogen will get 2 electrons in its outer shell. So they both have complete outer shells. So they want to gain a noble gas electronic structure. Both atoms have the same number of electrons in their outer shell. This is wrong, because in hydrogen's outer shell, it can only hold 2 electrons. But in carbon, it can hold 8. So therefore, B is wrong, C is wrong, D is wrong, and A is the answer. Question 7. Which formula is an empirical formula? Okay, empirical formula just means simplest form. So you cannot divide it by anything else. So if we have a look at options, right? A is C2H4O. Can you make this any smaller? You cannot. So therefore the answer has to be A. But for example, if you take B, you can make B smaller. So B's empirical formula would be C2H4O. I hope that makes sense. And do not get sort of blindsided by these kind of tricks, right? The fact that they put COOH is there to trick you into thinking that this is the empirical formula. But if you actually combine all of the carbons together, so you'll be C4, all the hydrogens together will be H8, and finally the two oxygens. This is actually the molecular formula, and you can actually simplify this into C2H4O as well, right? So you need to be careful with these kind of things. They just want to trick you to making you think that since they separate the elements, then therefore it is empirical formula. That is wrong. Okay? So you just need to make sure that you can divide it enough that you cannot be divided anymore. And therefore it is in its simplest form, so it will be A. Question 8. Heating iron sulfide, FeS2, in air produces sulfur dioxide. What is the maximum mass of sulfur dioxide produced from 120 kilograms of iron sulfide? Okay, so this, you need to remember one formula. Mass over the MR is the mole. Okay, so you want to get from FeS2 to sulfur dioxide, right? So first thing you want to do is take 120 kilograms and you divide it by the MR of FeS2. So you look at the periodic table, you'll know that 56 plus 32. So this is the MR of FeS2, right? And funnily enough, the answer will be 1, right? 120 over 120 is 1. So since you have 1, this means 1 mole. Okay, so now, once you have this mole, you need to find the ratio between this and this. Okay, so the ratio between 4 to 8, if you simplify this, it will turn into 1 to 2. So therefore, you need to multiply this by 2, right? So when you multiply this by 2, you get 2 moles of SO2 produced. Okay? So now, you need to reuse this formula to find the mass of sulfur dioxide produced. Okay? So mole mass equals mole times MR. Right? You rearrange this formula, you get mass equals moles times MR. So finally, what you want to do is 2 times the MR is 32 plus 16 plus 16. Oops. And then finally, your answer, you will actually get B, 128. Okay. So this one, you just need to know how to use this formula to find the ratio. And you need to remember this sort of formula as well. Okay. Question 9. Which substance produces hydrogen and bromine when electrolyzed? Okay. First off, you are producing hydrogen, right? When you electrolyze molten lead bromide, you will not get hydrogen because lead bromide does not contain hydrogen, right? So therefore D is wrong. The 3 of these might produce hydrogen because they are all aqueous, okay? Second thing, it is not copper bromide. Why? Because when you electrolyze copper bromide, since copper is less reactive in the reactivity series, copper is less reactive in the reactivity series compared to hydrogen, hydrogen won't be released and instead copper will be released. Okay, so you don't want that. You want to release hydrogen, so therefore A is wrong. Okay, now between B and C, the difference here is that one is concentrated and one is dilute. And to produce bromine, you want to have a concentrated solution. Okay, Because if you have a dilute solution, you'll instead produce oxygen. Because there is too much water, you'll produce oxygen instead of the halogen, right? So this is also the case for chlorine, right? So whenever you want to produce the halogen, you want to make sure the solution is concentrated. So the answer is B. Okay, question 10. Which statements about hydrogen fuel cells are correct? So first you need to remember the reaction for the hydrogen fuel cell. So the reaction that takes place is actually number 3. The overreaction is 2H2 plus O2 arrow 2H2O, right? So therefore, 3 is correct. And you see here, there's only one waste product. So the water is the only water is formed as the only waste product. So 1 and 3 are correct. Answer is A. Okay. I should note that why 4 is wrong is because if you look at this in a different light, this is actually also a combustion reaction. So combustion means you add O2 to something, right? And combustion is always exothermic. So you know that this reaction is not endothermic because you are adding oxygen, and therefore it is exothermic. Okay, ethane gas is completely burned in excess oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. The equation for the reaction is shown. The table shows the bond energies involved in the reaction. What is the total energy change in the reaction? Okay, so how do you do this? It's basically you just want to tally up all the bonds on the left side and you subtract it from the right side. So you just want to know the difference between the product and the reactant. Right? So you need to just tally up the bonds. So C2H4, it will have one CC bond. So it'll have 4 CH bonds times 4, right? And you need to add 3 O2 bonds. Right? So this is the calculation for the left side. So if you put it in a calculator, times 4 plus okay, you get the answer of 3751. Okay? Then on the right side, CO2, you'll have 2 CO bonds, and since there's 2 molecules, you need to multiply it 2 times. So in total, you'll have 2 of 799 times 2, right? Make sense? 2 of there's 2 CO bonds in each molecule, and then you have 2 molecules, so it's 2 times 2, so technically you have 4, right? Plus, same thing for H2O, you have 2 OH bonds in each molecule, and you multiply it by 2 molecules, so therefore, this total will be 5064. Okay, so now all you need to do is to find the sort of energy change, which is delta H, right? You just need to take 5064 minus 3751. You can also do it reverse. It doesn't really matter that much. And you will get 1313 kJ per mole. Right? And finally, since the question tells you it is exothermic, your energy change is negative. So therefore, you'll have a negative 1313 kJ per mole energy change. So you scroll down, the answer is C. Okay, question 12. Which role describes the effect on the activation energy and the frequency of particle collisions when the temperature of a chemical reaction is increased? So this one is about rates of reaction, right? So you need to know what temperature changes. So temperature increases a particle's energy, therefore they will move faster and they will collide more frequently. So if we look at the answer, activation energy. Is there any change in activation energy? So activation energy is the amount of energy required for a reaction to occur. And temperature actually does not affect activation energy. So therefore A and C is wrong because temperature has no effect. Okay, so there's no change. Frequency of collisions. When you increase temperature, the average kinetic energy of particles increases. And what happens when particles have more energy? They move more, and therefore they will collide more. So therefore, answer is B. Okay? The only thing that can change the activation energy would be the use of a catalyst. Okay, since here there's no catalyst, you only change temperature, no change in activation energy. Okay, question 13. Solid copper sulfate exists in two different forms, anhydrous and hydrated. One of these forms is blue and the other is white. The change between these two forms is reversible. So here you see the reversible symbol. What is the blue form and how is the change from blue form to white form brought about? Okay, so with this, if you take paper 6, you need to remember this anyways, so this should be pretty easy. But how I like to remember it is, if it's blue, it contains water, because water is blue, right? In drawings and everything, water is blue, although it's not really blue. Right, so blue form contains water, therefore it's hydrated. So A and B is wrong. Okay? When you change it to white form, you're actually removing the water. Okay? So therefore, since blue form have water and you change it to white form, you're removing the water. How do you change it to white form? You need to add heat and evaporate the water, or to remove the water, so to say. So answer is D. Okay? Great. 14. Sodium ions and oxygen ions combine with chromium ions to form a salt. The salt sodium dichromate has a formula Na2Cr2O7. What's the oxidation state of chromium in this salt? Okay, first thing you need to know is that since it's a salt, right? They tell you it's a salt. The total the total number on the corner, this number of this whole thing needs to equal to 0. Okay? So how to find oxidation state? Since they tell you O is 2 minus and Na is 1 plus, you just need to sort of make an equation, right? So 2, because there's 2 Na, right? Plus 2x, right? We can use x as a sort of variable, 2x, plus, minus 14 equals 0. Okay, why minus 14? Because 7 times negative 2 is minus 14. So 2 plus 2x minus 14 equals 0. So therefore 2x minus 12 equals 0. 2x equals 12. And finally x equals 6. Okay, it's pretty easy. So therefore the oxidation state will be plus 6. Okay? Okay, 15. The concentration of hydrogen ions in this hydrochloric acid is higher than the concentration of hydrogen ions in this ethanoic acid is higher. Okay. So why is there a difference? So since they're using the same volume and the same concentration, the difference has to lie within the chemical itself, right? What's the difference between hydrochloric acid and ethanoic acid? So if you remember, one is a strong and one is a weak acid. So which one is the weak acid? The organic acid is the weak acid. So ethanoic acid is organic, so therefore it is weak. So what is the definition of weak acid? So when you talk about weak acids, it means that they only partially dissociate in water. That means only some of their H plus will be released. Because H plus is hydrogen ion, right? Hydrogen ions are H plus. Only some of it will be released because this dissociation process is actually in equilibrium, right? Versus in hydrochloric acid where it's more reaction. Okay, so the difference in hydrogen ion concentration has to lie with the fact that ethanoic acid is only partially dissociated because it is a weak acid. Okay, next. Which oxide is classified as an amphoteric oxide? This one you just have to remember. Answer is A, aluminium oxide. So easy way to remember this is amphoteric starts with A, aluminium starts with A, so therefore A is the answer. 17. Which metal produces the salt copper 2 carbonate? Okay, so we have a look at this. So the answer is B. Why? Because first step, you add CuO to dilute sulfuric acid, you change it to CuSO4. The first step, right? CuSO4 is soluble, so therefore it will be aqueous. And then when you add excess aqueous sodium carbonate, you react it, and therefore you get not copper carbonate. Yeah, yes, then you get copper carbonate. Sorry, I got a bit confused there. But anyways, when you add aqueous sodium carbonate, the sodium will displace the copper in the CuSO4 and you'll produce Na2SO4, and the copper will join with the carbonate group. So therefore, this is how you get CuCO3. And obviously, after everything, you need to filter off the precipitate. Okay? Next. Which statements about the trends across the period of the periodic table are correct? So, aluminium is more metallic than sodium. This one is a bit of a iffy one because you cannot actually tell based on the trend, right? You cannot really tell this. Beryllium is more metallic than carbon. This is true because carbon is a non-metal, beryllium is a half metal, so to say, or is pretty much a metal. Boron is more metallic than lithium. This is wrong because boron is a non-metal, lithium is a metal. Magnesium is more metallic than silicon. This is correct because magnesium is a full metal, silicon is more of like a half metal. Okay, so this one you kind of just need to know the sort of how metal each thing is. So the answer for this is C. Okay, question 19. Some information about elements in group 2 of the periodic table is shown. So they take the time taken to make this volume of hydrogen gas when 1 gram of metal is added to cold water, the density and melting point. So they want you to identify the correct trends in reactivity, density, and melting point. So, reactivity. So if you look at this column is for reactivity, okay? The time taken to make hydrogen gas when added to cold water. So if it has higher reactivity, it would take a less amount of time to make the same volume of gas, okay? So therefore, from no reaction to 10 seconds, it will mean that the reactivity actually increases down the group. So therefore, A and B is wrong. Now, density, right? So density is this one. This is density. You can't really see it, but okay, here you go. So density. Density, if you take a look, 1.85, 1.74, and 1.54. 2.62, 3.51. So this is actually, the numbers are kind of all over the place, right? There's no clear trend. Therefore, once again, C or D. And finally, melting point. So if you take a look, initially, it might seem that the melting point decreases. However, there's this sort of anomalous result, right? This is lower than 850, which is the next one, right? So therefore, you cannot say that the melting point increases or decreases down the group. You have to say that there is no clear trend. Therefore, the answer is D. Question 20. A new element, oxfordium, was discovered with the following properties. Insoluble in water, does not conduct. OX2 is the element of the formula of the element. And it has a triple bond. So you need to think about this in a sort of, in a simple way, right? What only other element that you can think of has a triple bond? N2, right? Nitrogen is triple bonded, and it can also be found in this sort of form. It does not conduct electricity, and it is also insoluble in water. So nitrogen shares all of these properties with oxfordium. So therefore, if you were to put this in a periodic table, where will you put it? You have to put it in the same group as nitrogen. So what group is nitrogen in? Group 5. Which row describes the similarity and the difference between chlorine and bromine? So these two are halogens. Okay, so let's see the question. Both are gases at room temperature and pressure. This is wrong. Bromine would be a liquid. Both exist as diatomic molecules. Okay, this is correct. Chlorine is more dense than bromine. This is wrong. Bromine is more dense than chlorine. Bromine has a higher mass number. Both have atoms with 7 outer shell electrons. This is correct. Only bromine will react with aqueous sodium chloride. This is wrong. Bromine cannot react with sodium chloride because chlorine is more reactive than bromine. Okay. And finally, with D, both react with aqueous potassium iodide. That is true because both chlorine and bromine have a higher reactivity than iodine. This is correct. Chlorine is more reactive than bromine. That is also correct. Answer is D. Because when you go down group 7, right, when you go down group 7, the reactivity will decrease. Okay? Which statement describes transition elements? So transition elements are basically your average metal that you can think of, like iron or like copper, right? Those are transition elements. So when you think of iron and copper, what do they have? They have high densities, right? They're pretty heavy. So C and D is wrong. And they have high melting points. So the answer is A. Which gas is made when powdered zinc is added to dilute hydrochloric acid? So you need to remember metal plus acid. You will get sort of salt. Oopsie. You will get salt plus H2. Okay, you just need to remember this sort of process, right? The answer will be hydrogen. 24. The diagram represents the structure of a solid. Which solids does the diagram represent? So, if you look at it, there are different sizes, right? There's one that's gray and there's one that's white. And there are two different sizes which represent different elements. So is it brass? It could be brass because brass is a mixture of two elements, correct? So therefore C and D is wrong because brass could be an option. Is it graphite? No. Graphite is entirely made up of carbon, so it cannot be graphite. Okay, so A is wrong, so therefore you're only left with B. Okay. Steel is an alloy of iron. Which statement explains why steel is stronger than iron? Okay. Steel contains carbon, which is a very hard substance. This doesn't explain why it's stronger than iron, right? The carbon atoms in steel bond together very strongly. This doesn't make sense because in steel is a mixture and it's an alloy of iron, right? Which means it contains iron. Okay. The carbon atoms in steel make the iron atom bonds strong together very strongly. This also doesn't make sense because the carbon doesn't make the iron atoms bond more strongly. Instead, what the carbon's atom do is that they prevent the layers from sliding over each other, right? So it's much like in this diagram up here in the previous question, where they sort of disrupt the order of the arrangement, right? So therefore, they cannot slide over each other, and therefore it is more strong. It is stronger. Okay. 26. 3 students XYZ are told that solid P reacts with dilute acids and also conducts electricity. The table shows the student suggestions about the identity of P. Which students are correct? So P reacts with acids and also conducts electricity. Okay. So copper, iron, and graphite, they all conduct electricity, so therefore you cannot use that as a distinguisher. But you can distinguish by their reaction with dilute acids, right? So if you take HCl for example, copper cannot react with HCl because copper is less reactive than the hydrogen, right? And same goes with graphite. These two are less reactive than hydrogen, so therefore it cannot displace the hydrogen in the HCl. So therefore there's no reaction that will occur. So therefore, the only one that will actually react with HCl is Y, which is iron. Okay? Okay, question 27. Which statement explains why aluminium appears to be unreactive? This is because it is coated in an oxide layer, right? So the aluminium actually reacts with the oxygen in the air, and so it kind of like forms a coating above the actual aluminium that's underneath. So that's why it appears to be unreactive, because it creates aluminium oxide, which is unreactive. Okay, 28. During the electrolysis of aluminium oxide, the mass of the carbon anode changes. So describe the change and give a reason for this change. So when you electrolyze aluminium oxide, at the carbon anode, you will actually produce oxygen, okay? Because anode is the positive electrode, and O is a negative ion, right? Oxygen is a negative ion, and therefore it will be attracted to the positive anode. So therefore, the mass change of the anode will decrease because the oxygen that's produced will actually react with the anode, and it will form carbon dioxide. So the answer is A. So it produces, when you electrolyze, you produce O2, and then the O2 will react with the carbon dioxide. Will react with the carbon anode, and then it will form carbon dioxide. Okay, 29. Several processes are used to treat domestic water. Which row identifies a reason for the given process? So, chlorination removes impurities. Wrong. Chlorination is to kill microorganisms. Okay. Filtration removes insoluble solids. This is the answer, right? When you filter something, you want to remove the solid stuff that cannot be dissolved. Okay. Sedimentation also does the same thing as filtration. It sort of separates the liquid from the solid, so therefore C is wrong. Use of carbon to kill bacteria. This is chlorine's job. Okay, so therefore answer is B. Okay, question 30. What is the equation for photosynthesis? Photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is just the reverse of respiration, right? So if you use a little bit of biology knowledge, photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water, you get glucose plus oxygen, right? So what's the equation? You just need to remember CO2 plus 6H2O, arrow, this is glucose, plus oxygen. Okay. 31. Which statement describes how CH bonds in methane gas in the atmosphere contribute to global warming? So this question is just asking you about how global warming happens. So what happens in global warming is that the bonds will absorb thermal energy, right, from the earth, right? So the earth will emit thermal energy and the CH bonds will absorb it, and then they will actually emit it back towards the earth. So the answer is D. So it's sort of like a half mirror of sorts, right? The earth releases heat, and then the CH bonds will sort of release it back. But some will actually get through lah. Okay, it's like a half mirror. Okay, next. The structural formula of two hydrocarbons are shown. Which statement about hydrocarbons is correct? So, if you take a look closely, you'll realize that these two are actually alkanes. And alkanes are saturated. Okay? So they are both alkenes. This is wrong. They are both alkanes, right? If you cannot tell, you should draw it out. And you'll be able to tell. For example, if you draw this out, you'll be C, H all around. Right, so this is what the first one will look like if you drew it out. So if you don't know, you should draw it out. They are alkanes because they only have a carbon-carbon single bond. So they are not alkenes. Okay. They decolorize aqueous bromine. This is wrong also because this is a test for alkenes. Since they are not an alkene, they won't decolorize the aqueous bromine. They are structural isomers. This is correct because structural isomers are means that they have the same number of carbons and hydrogens, but they are just arranged in a different arrangement. So if we draw this one out, it will look like this. Right? So if you count, there's actually the same, in both of these, there's same number of carbon, same number of hydrogen. It's just that you put this end, one of the ends, and you put it in the middle. So therefore they are structural isomers. They have the same molecular formula, but they are actually arranged differently. That's it. And finally, D is wrong because addition reactions, you can only have addition reaction with alkenes. They need the double bond to have an addition reaction. So D is wrong. Okay, 33. The structural formula of Q is given. What is compound Q? So first you need to identify what compound Q is, right? So if you take a look at this, COO, it represents this bond, which is an ester link. So you know that this compound Q, is an ester. So how do you name an ester? The first part will be the number of carbons in the alcohol, and the second part will be the number of carbons in the acid. Okay? So, how do you know which side is alcohol and which side is acid? The side facing the two O's is the alcohol part. So, starting from here, you go left, this is the alcohol. And towards the right is the acid. Okay? So you just need to count the number of carbon. So 1, 2, 3 for alcohol, what is the prefix for 3 carbon is prop. So you have propyl. And then if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 4 carbon on the left side. So therefore, your N will be but, right? But means 4, butanoate. So therefore, your answer is propyl butanoate. With this, you just need to remember, when you see the COO, the side with the O is the alcohol. The side with the C is the acid. Okay? 34. Fractional distillation of petroleum is shown. Which fraction contains hydrocarbons with the longest chain length? So, how do you know? Longest chain length means highest boiling point, right? Since you have more molecules, the boiling point will automatically be higher because you need more energy to break every single bond, right? So therefore, you'll have the longest chain at the very bottom. Because in the fractional distillation column, yeah, separating all of these by their boiling points, right? So the answer is D. Because at the bottom, you'll have the highest BP. At the top, you'll have the lowest boiling point. Okay? 35. Which equation represents the cracking of an alkane? So what does cracking mean? Cracking means you break a bigger alkane into smaller alkanes or alkenes. Okay? So first of all, you're cracking an alkane. So the product must be an alkane first of all. C2H4 is not an alkane. It's an alkene. You need to remember the general formula, right? CnH2n. This is for alkene. But for alkane is CnH2n plus 2. Okay. C6H12, this is also an alkene, so it's wrong. C6H14, so this is an alkane. C6H14 is an alkane, so it's between C and D. But if you look at the definition of cracking, it's breaking a bigger thing into smaller alkanes or alkenes. If you look at C, C is wrong because you're breaking it into its elements, which is wrong. Okay? You want to break it into smaller alkanes or alkenes. So therefore, answer is D. Okay, 36. What is the structure of the product of reaction with propene and bromine? So, propene would look like this. So when you add bromine to propene, you break the double bond, right? You cut away one part of the double bond, you cut this, and then you'll be left with two bromine atoms that's connected, right? So what happens is the double bond breaks, and then it will connect to both the bromine atoms. So the answer would be C. Okay, 37. In reaction R, 2000 molecules of ethane react to form single molecule X only. Which term describes reaction R, ethane, and X? So reaction R is obviously addition. Because you have no other product form, only X is formed. So therefore it's addition. Okay, C and D is wrong. Next, since you have 2000 of CH2, this has to be a monomer, right? Monomer is single unit. Polymer is you chain all the single units together to make a polymer, right? So therefore, the monomer has to be the ethane. Therefore, it's A. And the X has to be polymer. Okay, 38. Part of the structure of polymer is shown. Which statements about polymer are correct? This polymer is nylon. So, one is wrong because of this. It could be nylon, but you don't know if it's nylon or not. So you cannot say that it is nylon because nylon, although nylon has this bond, this link, you cannot say that it is nylon because there are many other things that has this link and it's not nylon. Okay, so 1 is wrong. The polymer is formed by condensation polymerization. That's correct. So when you react the COOH, you react the NH2, right? You will actually get this bond, and you release H2O. So you cut this part. You cut one hydrogen off, and then the OH and the H will form water, and then the bond will form. So this bond is called the amide bond. Right? So yes, it's correct. Condensation, because it releases water. There are ester linkages between the monomers. Wrong, because this is an amide bond. It's not an ester link. Okay? So 3 is wrong. So the answer is C. 39. The concentration of acids and alkalis can be determined by titration. Which pieces of equipment are needed to perform a titration? So, you need two things. One, you need a pipette, and you need a burette. Pipette is to measure a fixed volume. Burette is to slowly drip the acid or alkali into the other solution. Okay, so which of these is a pipette and which is a burette? 2 is a pipette, 4 is a burette. Answer is D. Finally, which chromatogram shows the RF value of a substance that is calculated? So RF value is distance traveled by the substance or the sort of pigment, right? Over distance traveled by solvent front. Okay, so if you see here, A is wrong because this is pigment 1 and this is pigment 2. You're not finding RF value of this. Next, X is the solvent front, Y is the substance, right? But and they gave you the formula Y over X, so it fits with this, so the answer is B. C is wrong because they put X over Y. They did the reverse of this formula. They put it upside down, so it's wrong. And D is wrong because they didn't start from the line. Okay? And they're measuring the distance of the two pigments. Okay? So this line up here is actually the solvent front. So answer is B. Okay, so that's it for this paper. Remember to like and subscribe. I will do more papers in the future. Thank you very much. Bye bye.